I'm a little bit embarrassed to say that I'm a writer because I don't write enough, and I write the smallest books that you can find probably on the market. My name is Ly Thanh Kim Thuy, and I've been a writer for about 15 years or so. And then before that, and worked as a lawyer. And after that, I opened a restaurant. So I owned a restaurant for 5 years before starting to write.
Welcome to The Vietnamese. I'm your host, Kenneth Nguyen. Being part of a culture of nearly 100 million Vietnamese people in the world today comes with a lot of pain, proud history, and privilege. Join me as I highlight and explore the Vietnamese experience from all over.
And I've done a lot of TV. So I have now like a TV show. It's called La Table de Kim. So basically Kim's Table. I'm invited as a speaker very often, maybe about 125 to 150 per year. So I don't know what is my profession.
Yes, I see. So what was your journey to Canada?
I left when I was 10 from Saigon, but the boat left from Rạch Giá, my father's hometown. And it's the coast, and it just happened that the boat we had access to left from that city. And then we arrived in Malaysia, and I stayed in Malaysia my family and I. We were lucky that we all, we made it, all of us together. We arrived in two different cities. The first one is Sheraton. I think it's the beach where we landed. And then after that, in a camp called Kwantan, I think. And then we got accepted to Canada, and the government sent us to Quebec, to the province of Quebec, because we were Francophone. My parents could already speak French, so it was a natural match, I think, for us to go to Quebec. And I've been living here in Montreal for the last, we arrived here in 79. So 44 years. Is it? Yeah, 44. Oh my God, I'm old.
So you've had a few careers: restaurant, you were a lawyer, you were a translator. You were sent to Vietnam in the early days to kind of help figure out how capitalism could work in Vietnam. Is that right?
Okay, I'll try to say it in a way that I can still go back to Vietnam. But back then, in the mid 90s, Canada started, building a relationship with Vietnam. And it was the first project between Vietnam and Canada. And back then it was called SIDA, where we had, funds to help other countries. And Vietnam had, accepted our project, which was called Policy Implementation Assistance Project. But basically, we were just working with the 10 advisors who responded directly to the Vietnamese Prime Minister on different reform policies. I know I sound so boring, right? What I'm saying right now. But when you go back,
yeah, I don't think it's boring because it offers insight into the change that I am always questioning about Vietnam and the West. Because, we think of it traditionally as a communist country, but hearing about your legacy and your work in the early days, it really fascinates me. So that's why I asked.
Yeah, and it's always surprising, right? Because these projects need to be very confidential.
Right.
Back then, so we couldn't talk about it. We couldn't make any advertising about, the presence of Canada in Vietnam through this project, because just for the image of it, how a communist country would accept advice from the West. So they had to be careful for their image, and we totally understand that. You know how it is, politics, yes. Right? And so if you want things to be efficient and impactful, it has to be not controversial or scandalous, right? And so we arrived there with the 10 advisors, and we worked on any issues, in the sense that the prime minister could have any question about anything. And very simple, back then Vietnam wanted to open up and become a member of the WTO. And how do you become a member of the WTO? You need someone from the inside. And Canada has always been a very good negotiator because we're quiet and discreet, so we could be this mediator, not negotiator, but mediator between different members and countries, applying countries. And Vietnam was aspiring to become a member of the WTO. So many of the Canadian experts here would spend time with Vietnam just to imagine, a strategy. Where do we begin? For example. And back then, in 94, 95, the civil code had not been adopted yet. So they were drafting it. And before 1975, the civil code was very similar to the one in France, right? Because of colonization. And in 75, of course, Vietnam could no longer have a civil code which was too similar to the French code. So that was abolished. So Vietnam didn't have a civil code for 20 years or so. And they were drafting it again. And then how would I say it? What would be the color of this civil code? Which influence Vietnam would be ready to accept. And the advantage of Quebec is that we have the French tradition, but also the English tradition, the common law and the civil law. So we have this mixture, of two main or two most used or looked at traditions. And this is why Vietnam was very interested in hearing how Quebec works out this dichotomy, or the how we can blend the two traditions together. So that was one, for example. And at that point in Vietnam, there were no private companies. They were only state-owned enterprises. So Vietnam wanted to open up. How do you transform a centralized economy into a market economy? How do you all of a sudden privatize these state-owned enterprises when the word itself, privatizing, is contrary to the theory of communism? How do you present this to the party, right, for it to be accepted? It was very difficult. So the experts from the Canadian side and the Vietnamese worked very hard to find a model that would fit for Vietnam, customize basically a model. And they called it, in French, was socialisation, socializing, socialization. Yeah, meaning that we will sell, these state-owned enterprises would sell social parts to society and not selling shares. You see, so then it would work with the model of Vietnam. And so it was very, very interesting. And of course, we were not there for the application of the ideas of the policies, but the Canadian experts on of the team where I was part of was there just to think of the concept and all the challenges that you would meet when you suggest, you make one recommendation or another, how we call one policy to the next. For example, Vietnam had insurance, but not the way that we do. And so they were looking into Singapore, for example, the system in Singapore and everywhere. And of course, Singapore could not be applicable for Vietnam because of the size of the population, for example.
Yep.
So we had to go find a model that would fit for Vietnam and how to modify it so that it might work. Yeah.
You know,
So
I came here, let's be clear, I came here to talk about your book, but I can spend the whole hour talking about this because the significance of this happening in 94, 95 from your team to go and speak to the lower just the people right above below the prime minister is fascinating because in the West, especially in the diaspora community, we commonly think of the communist government just being one way and trying to be one way. But as I'm discovering people like you, I'm learning that the changes and the wanting and the ability to change was happening much, much earlier than we are perceiving it in real time today. And the openness of all of this is important to know because then the rest of the Vietnamese diaspora in the world can kind of take a glimpse inside of things move slowly and change slowly, but there is this sort of attention and intention to change policy.
and when you like when you ride a motorcycle, it's easy to turn around. But when you're riding a train,
Cannot.
if you want to make a U-turn, you fall. Right. And we've seen it in many Eastern countries, after the fall of the Soviet era. You cannot make a quick turn. And even today, you can have revolutions. And I'm not pleading for the right way or the wrong way of doing things, but Vietnam chose the slower way. And it's not all bad or it's not all good, right? Everything, I said, there are so many nuances that we have to, and I'll give you one example. We think that the way we do in the West, and I say we because we're living in Canada now, and I think we are living in one of the best countries in the world. So of course, it's easy for us to think that, oh, we have the best system, we have the best way to do. And we would arrive in a different country and say, hey, you should import this structure. And I give you this example, and it says so much about the importance of listening and moving in the rhythm and the speed of the place where we're at. So at one point we had a whole seminar with women politicians, member of parliaments, because for Canada it's always important to have one part of the project where we focus really on helping women and the environment back then in 1995. Wow. Already. It's not only now. In 1995, in any project, there's always a budget, and how would I say it? It's mandatory. We need to talk about women and the environment. And so this project worked also on the environment and the women. And so we organized a whole seminar with the MPs, member of parliaments in Vietnam, and we had Canadian MPs coming to share their experience. And they started talking how they prepare for their political platform, how they dress themselves, how they travel, how difficult it is for women. Sometimes, we have different needs and so on and so forth. And I listened to the interpretation, which was perfect because it's not always perfect, right? And and I'm there to kind of detect when it's not going perfectly, and then I'll raise, a little flag saying, oh, maybe this word got misunderstood and so on and so forth. But this time, the interpretation was perfect, but somehow I felt like the audience, the Vietnamese group, was not absorbing anything. The chemistry, it didn't, the wires didn't touch, right? It didn't connect. So I said, okay, there is so at the first coffee break, I asked the Vietnamese women, I said, oh, do you find this interesting, or what is not interesting to you in this speech, in this presentation? And they said, oh, it's nice to hear, but it cannot apply to us because in the Western world, like the Canadian MP said, you have to make promises, you have to say what you're capable of. Vote for me and I'll make this change. And I have this experience and that. In Vietnam, you cannot do that because then you look like someone who's pretentious, right? And so the system works in a way that you need to have someone else to talk about you in front of you. Say, you should vote for Kenneth because I've worked with him and he had made this project, flourish, and it became so big and so important, so on and so forth.
Right, right.
And so it's culture. You see, so and yes, the idea it might be the same, and we're looking at the same objective here is to be elected, but the way of getting there is completely different. The methodology,
the mechanics,
and this is why it's so important, for any country to come in, to when we sit down at a table to listen. Instead of taking for granted that what we have is the best, it is the best for the environment where we're in, and not for the other one. Yeah. So there were so many interesting questions. Yeah.
Now, during this whole process of living and working professionally and doing these kind of things, when did you start to have ideas of becoming a writer?
Oh, I never had the idea of because in order to write, you need to master a language. That's your first tool, right? You need words.
Yeah.
And when you don't have words, you cannot identify all the emotions, all the sensations, all the feelings that you feel. So how can you be precise enough in order to write? Then to me, when we don't have words, we are kind of handicapped of our own emotions. And, just frustration and irritation. It's not the same. You can say you're not in a good mood, but that doesn't give you, not forget the person who is listening to you. If you're frustrated, sad, are you melancholy? Are you feeling melancholia or nostalgia?
Yeah,
it's not the same. So you need to have the word to help you understand what you're feeling, right? To me, and when you go to the doctor, they would ask you, "Oh, how is your pain?" And it's just like painful, right? And it's like, is it sharp? Is it constant? Is it sudden? Is it, all
of the descriptor words? Yeah.
And then you all of a sudden you're like, oh, there's so many different kinds of pains, right? That you had felt, but you didn't know. You're just like, I'm in pain because we don't have the words. So I thought
how would you not have the words when you speak? I know that you speak English, French, and Vietnamese fluently. What do you mean you don't have the words?
No, I don't speak English fluently. You can hear all the mistakes that I make.
No, you have so much vocabulary, but I can imagine that when you're thinking in French or thinking in Vietnamese, thinking in English, you have more words to convey. You have more than enough words to convey. So why would you?
But I didn't know that, like just now, I'm thinking, is it mistakes or errors? Two different things. And a word exists for a reason because it does have that nuance. And so I thought that I didn't have enough. It's just when is enough.
Yeah.
But at one point, and I had the luck to have someone said to me, and I had the restaurant and washing a lot of dishes, and this woman who came very often to the restaurant with different writers, and then I learned that she was the director of the Metropolis Blue, a festival here, literary festival in Montreal, and I knew of about the festival. I said, "Oh my God!" So I asked her all kind of questions, and at one point she said, "Do you know any Vietnamese authors?" Because she wanted to invite one, and it was in 2000. So at the at the beginning of 2000. So um, the Vietnamese authors in Vietnam were not translated, and outside of Vietnam there were still very few, if not none, almost, right, that I knew of. So I said to her, I said, I only know one, but he's dead, you know. And we talked, and she was a regular customer, right? And at one point she said, why don't you write? And I said, I don't have a tool, I don't have enough vocabulary or something like that. And she said, and I said, I make so many mistakes, when I write. And she said, the difficulty is not the language. Most authors would tell you the difficulty is to have a story to tell.
Right.
And in her mind, I had many stories to tell. So she said, just tell your story. There are people who are specialized in accompanying you, editing you, correcting, review, or how do you say that?
Yes,
revise.
Review. Yeah, review. Editors.
They are specialized. They're specialists. They're experts. They will help you with that. Don't worry. Just tell us your story. And she kind of gave me the freedom to say, who cares of the mistakes? And well, to be fair, I make very little mistakes, the spelling mistakes. I don't. And even the verbs and all that, I'm very good at it, the grammar. But I still make a lot of mistakes for predisposition, right? I never know. Yes. Uh, and the verbs, for the time. How do you say that? Tenses. I get all mixed up, and French is very complicated for the tenses. So even today when I write in my Google Drive, so that my friend, she's a friend actually, she's my corrector, I would say. She would go into the text whenever she wants, and then she would just ask me questions. Where are you on your timeline? Because I'm still in present time. I'm always going the Vietnamese way, that I'm here. That's it. I don't have any tense, or I try, but I make a lot of confusion because of the way I use the tenses. So yeah, she would ask me, where are you? Is this before or after that event? Or is this, this event happened how long after? Or was it sudden? Was it, something on a span of time? Or, she would ask me these questions, and she would help me make sense of what I was what I'm writing. And so I'm very spoiled to have someone like that, to accept to come into my text and read bad French, I think.
No, where did the inspiration for Rue come from?
I think I had written that book probably 500 times before, like a beginning, from different points of views. And and then you hit a wall at one point for one reason or the other. Maybe I wrote the story for in school, when you have to write something. Then I would write one little anecdote, of these stories, without knowing, but it was more for school, right? And yeah, so it was an easy story to tell, because I knew that story by heart almost. And because I had only 1 month off to write, and I didn't know I was writing. I just, had 1 month of penalty at home, because the father of my children, he back then he said to me, he said, okay, because he's Canadian, right? French Canadian, and I don't know, he wanted to become a lawyer. He became a lawyer. He wanted to, it's a very straight line. Whereas I kept changing, and he said, okay, you're 40 now, maybe, dream of your dream career and take a month off. And oh my God, for a Vietnamese to take a month off, what do you mean? That was the end of the world for me. But he forced me. It was a penalty period, basically. He said, you sit, stay home, take a month. And maybe I was very tired also. So he just wanted me to
Yeah.
go flatline for a while. And it happened during that month, in the sense that didn't I didn't know what was a dream career. And so I just started, putting the notes that I had, and those notes had been taken in the car, at red lights, because I fall asleep very easily at red lights. So that was one way for me to stay awake at red lights, that your hamster continues to run. And so I had these notes in a small notebook. And yeah, so I just put the notes in the computer, waiting for the end of the month. And that was the easiest thing to write about. You don't need any research. I had all the facts I needed to have.
The book is very short. I think it's 145 pages, right? And then now it's made into a movie that's traveled far. And it's, I think it's at Toronto, right? The Toronto Film Festival, which is a very prestigious film festival that the movies got selected to. So it is mind-blowing to me that your journey started on a 1 month period that your partner, he told you just take the month off and just do what you need to do. And from that point, which is 14 years ago to today, it's so inspiring for somebody even like me. I am blown away by the lack of planning, the lack of intention, the lack of foresight to know where you're going in life.
Do you need to know where you want to go?
I think a lot of people today put these vision boards, and you know what a vision board is? Yeah. They put up, cars, the house, and they put all these things up, and they go for it, and they try. But I often think and hear stories now where a lot of luck is involved, because it sounds like to me, if that lady who didn't come by from the book festival, if she wasn't part of your life, none of this journey probably would not have happened. And if you didn't have a restaurant, it didn't happen, right?
And life, the thing, I think, yes, there's luck, right, to have met this woman. And the notebook had been given to me by a friend, with a note, on the first page, which said, it's time that you write for yourself, or something like that. And the beauty of this is that, yes, there's luck, absolutely. Why our boat made it and not the next boat, and why we got accepted to Quebec and not the next family, and why Quebec instead of Texas. And I would have a completely different life, it just happened that way. And my mom used to say that, luck is everywhere, right? But we need to have the tools to be ready when luck comes to you, and take on that luck, right? Because luck could be just right in front of you, and you don't see it, and you miss it. And I'll give you one example where, and luck doesn't come to you, in flashing, like, I'm your luck, take me. It doesn't. I don't think it works that way. Very often, it comes disguised, in a costume or something. You think even that it's an unlucky moment, But if you still take it, you still live and you still go into it, then you discover that it was just, a step that you had to make in order to get to the real fortune
But
behind
how do
it.
you know? How do you know when
Ask
that
the question.
thing is disguised and how do you know that that's the path that you should choose?
You don't know. So just give credit to your instinct. I especially at 54, because you live long. Well, to me, we've lived long enough, to by instinct, you just know that you have to go left and not right. And if it was a wrong one, find something in the left that was positive, that helped you find the right turn. It's never the wrong turn, in the sense that the restaurant was a wrong turn. I didn't know how to cook. It was very painful, and difficult, and it was physically so demanding. But at the same time, if I didn't pay attention to my customers and complain every day, for example, how hard it was, instead of just enjoying all these different people
Yeah.
who come to the restaurant and eavesdropping, their conversation, and see what they need or foresee what they need, then I would not have met this woman. Yes, she was there. But if I did not pay attention to, oh, she needed a pen because she was taking note, or to see on the table there were a pile of books, and ask her questions. What do you do? How come you have so many, you always come with so many books, for example? Then I would never discover that she's a director of a festival. And then we wouldn't have had a conversation. So I think it's being there. And it's very cliche to say to be present, right? But it is. Life is, and when we have a destination, I think we always try to run as fast as possible to reach that destination, and we miss out on all the things that which are talking to us, right, on the side, and we just don't listen because we are we have one track to follow. But when we give ourselves the rights to look left and right, no matter where we're going, and to follow, that little star taking you, then, that little flower that diverted your path. Yeah, but maybe that flower is a sign to say, go that way, or a helping hand. And it happens so often that you think that you're helping someone, and then at the end it was that person who.
Wow.
And at the very beginning, like this director, I wanted to make her experience at the restaurant pleasant and easy, and I remember I brought her that pen just because she was looking, and I didn't want her to whatever stand up and go look for a pen and disrupt her conversation. So right away, like, here's, and I just put it next to her hand and laughed, because I didn't want her to stop her conversation. And so you think that I thought that I was helping her, but actually no, it was me opening a door for myself, right? It's incredible. So I think it's luck, but you need to, bite into it, and not, and yes, it's scary. It was so scary when my boss, a very senior lawyer, called me up, and it was an office. It was Stegman Elliott. I don't know if you know it. They have it was the first international
Law firm.
law firm, and in Montreal we were more than 100 lawyers. So if you add everybody together, we were like 500 people. So it was just a huge thing, and to have a very extremely senior lawyer calling you, that you're done, right? You think that you're dead because you've done something wrong. And it was Marc Lalonde. I don't know if you know him, but under Trudeau father. He was chief of cabinet, who was the minister of justice, minister of finance, natural resource, like this big man. So after politics, he went back to law.
Yep.
So he was not just senior, he was like the senior of the seniors.
Right.
And for him to call me, I I thought I was being fired for some very serious mistakes, like because he wouldn't, why this man would call me? I was a young girl, stupid young girl. And he just said, "Oh, do you want to come along with us? We have a project in Vietnam and it's called Policy Implementation Assistance Project." And I had no idea what that meant. I still don't know today, okay, what it means. And what is that? And I said yes right away, because he was such an experienced man that I said, if I how would I say it? If I breathed the same air than him, for sure I'll become more intelligent, right? In my mind, it was like, oh, I said to him, I said, oh, I can make coffee for you, and I can carry your bags, and then finally I couldn't even make coffee because I didn't drink coffee and my coffee was so bad, and I couldn't carry my bags or his bags either, because he just passed away and he was 6'2" probably, so he was the one who carried my bags, and I said, but you have to say yes to life. And I remember I said to him, I said, "Oh, Mr. Alon, there's a problem though. I have already quit." And I was about to leave, in a month or two. And because I don't think law was for me. And he said, "Oh, that's technicality or something like that. Yeah. Do you want this project or not? Do you want to come with me or not?" And I said, "Yeah, of course." And he said, "Okay, then come along, forget whatever." See, and so it's about saying yes to life all the time. And yeah, sometimes it's just a wrong turn, but it's never wrong.
Wrong, right.
If I had not made that wrong turn with the restaurant, I would not have met all these people. The producer of the movie was one of the customers
at the restaurant.
And you know what happened? He was someone who was very quiet, always sat in the quietest corner, and reading, always reading. So the team and I, we I don't know, we decided that he was a librarian, because he was very polite and he spoke a beautiful French. I don't know, we just give stories to our clients. And I thought that he didn't have any friends, because he was there alone a lot reading. So I said to my team, is that whenever he gets to dessert and coffee, just tell me. If I can get out of the kitchen, I'll come and sit with him so that I can give him a friend.
Wow.
And 2 minutes, taking care of your customers, right? So I went out when I could, and those 2 minutes add up, right? And we did become kind of friends. And for maybe a year, I didn't know what he was doing. And at one point, he came in with an actor that I knew, and he asked for me to come say hello. And I said, "Oh, so you advise, you books?" You recommend books to actors? And he just looked at me and said, "I don't understand your question." I said, "But you're not a librarian?" And he said, "No." I'm a producer. And what does a producer do? I had no idea what that meant. And he was a very famous, actually, very important TV and movie producer here in Quebec. And so he explained to me what he did. And there was no interest for me, that was a world apart. Yeah. It was another planet. And so we just chit-chatted. And when I had closed the restaurant, I said, "Oh my God, I thought you were lonely," And he said, "Oh, he thought that I needed to vent, like about my problems at the restaurant. So he endured me for all those years because he thought that I needed a friend to talk to. So, so he was the one who bought the rights, who took the notes, the first 20 pages that I had. He read it and he said he was ready to take it to a publisher, and who was a friend, whatever. And I said, no, I don't even think that I can write up to 25 pages. It was just penalty period. And he said no. He thought that I should continue, and I said no. But then you get addicted, right? To writing and to sitting on a chair and just dream of and tell dreams, and so I gave myself not a year, just 1 month at a time, a week at a time, almost. Say, oh yeah, I have. I'll go to an interview next week, or next month, or you just postpone things, and then at the end, I thought that was it. I was going back to the office, to an office, and André, the producer, he took the piles of notes that I had, printed out by another customer of the restaurant, Karine Banas, who gave me the little notebook, and I think you know her. She's in Plan B and in the series. What's
Chantal?
the name? Karine Vanas. I'll spell it for you so you can see it. And yeah, so she was the one who came to the house with a printer because I didn't have a printer, and so she printed out, and she had a copy, he had a copy, and that was it.
Karine. And so yeah, the way I got to know the book was many years ago. A friend of mine, Chantal Thuy, told me about the book, and she said she fell in love with the material. And so that's how, when it finally got to Toronto and I saw it all over the internet, I was like, oh my God, this is the book that Chantal was talking about.
And it was Cameron Bailey who took it for Canada Reads, and then he won Canada Reads with that book. And I remember he called me up when he chose that, but he didn't know me at all. It was, we didn't know each other. He just called and he said, I'm going to champion your book. And I said, it's the wrong book. You'll never win Canada Reads. It's too small. It's not in the tradition, the English tradition to read small books. You like big books, and yeah, for many reasons I said no. You should change. It's not the right book. And she said, it's not for you to choose. I was just informing you that I'm doing Rue. And yeah, and that gave a big boost for Rue in English Canada. But Rue in French, in Europe, it was crazy. So that first year, the book got published. So I didn't even send the manuscript to anybody. It was André, the producer. He took it and
sent it to the publishers.
Gave it to a publisher that I didn't even know existed. And it's the biggest producer here in Quebec. I had no idea. And then
the luck and from having the restaurant and having these people come to the restaurant and I don't even have time to get into why you got into food from being a lawyer, but that's a different podcast.
A different ball game. But and then and then that first year, France bought it. And then another 10 country, and then another 10, and another 10. And we're now at 45 countries. How could that be?
Yeah. How could that be? And you're speaking like at 120 days out of the year now.
Yeah. Yeah. How crazy.
It is so crazy.
How crazy.
Yeah. And to think that you don't have a plan. I come here and I sometimes ask, what do you have plans for the future? But that's not a question that somebody like you think about.
I don't know. The worst question you can ask me is, what will you do next, or next year, or in 5 years? I have no idea. I literally haven't, and I don't have enough time to dream. When I have an idea, it's not a dream. Let's turn it into a project. Or it doesn't work, then let's push it aside and go with the next idea, because there are thousands of ideas. Life comes to me as a like a tsunami, since we arrived here in Canada.
So let me ask you, the way that you've already seen the finished film, right? So in your mind, how different is the finished film to the actual writer, the person that write the film?
I think because we don't have a budget to do the whole book, right? So you have probably only 10 pages of the book in the film. But the beauty of it is that when you look at the movie, you don't feel like you've missed anything. It's so crazy for me to say it this way, but it stands, it feels whole,
complete.
It tells exactly the message. I thought that I was a minimalist, that I boiled down to everything to the smallest, whatever, but actually the movie does that. And like we say, an image can tell 1,000 words.
Yes.
Like just one image, you need 1,000 words to understand. But so that was it's the beauty of a movie. And I gave the total freedom to the director and the scriptwriter to imagine their movie. I wanted their movie and not mine.
Right.
I've already seen my movie. I need to, and I don't have this kind of ownership.
Yeah.
That it has to be exactly like what I think. And I've always told, I always told them, yeah, if you can surprise me, I would be so happy, but the only part that to me was important was the details, the credibility of everything, of the gestures, of the clothes, of the names, of those details to make the movie real and true. A Vietnamese girl would never stand with her hands in the back like this, because the does not allow you to do this. So I remember in the mood board,
yep.
At the very beginning, the director had a Vietnamese friend who was born here, grown up here. So basically, she's a Canadian, right?
Yeah.
So she wore a Vietnamese dress, but she has this thing, like this posture, and right away I said, this cannot be anywhere in the movie. This is wrong. And for example, at one point it said, in the script, it said the mother would clean, lice from the daughter's hair, and the daughter was mad at it, or was manifesting discomfort to the mother, like resisting or something. I said, there's no Vietnamese daughter resisting.
No.
That doesn't exist. Okay. Yeah. And you have to think, we just got out of a refugee camp. There's no resisting. And so, yeah, I would go into those little details, for me, that is important. For example, the plate of fruits, at the ancestors'
altar
table. The altar. They put, the fruits that they found at the market. So there were some Vietnamese fruit, but they also put a lemon, because it was yellow and it was bright. It was, for the image, it was beautiful. And I said, first, we don't have lemons in Vietnam. We don't use lemons. Number two, lime and lemons, lime is a very cheap fruit in Vietnam. Here it's expensive, but not in Vietnam.
Right.
So you would never give that to your ancestor, right? Off. And so, oh my God, I'm being, no, I don't talk that way. I just said, no, it wouldn't work, right? We have to take that away. So for those little details,
Yeah.
but not the storyline, not the way the story had to be told or put into image. That I gave freedom, total freedom.
Thuy, I look forward to seeing this one day. Movies are one of my favorite mediums in art to consume, and I can't wait to watch the film. And I want to thank you today for coming on and talking about your story. And I hope that we can, maybe if this gets released in the US, that we can come back and talk about the film itself and have a discussion about this if a distributor here in the US picks it up. But thank you so much today for your time.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
But even more so, and it was I was very happy to hear you say that you would be interested in knowing more about, the intention and the efforts that we rarely see in politics, of what happened in Vietnam back then. And now I am not aware enough to talk about politics in Vietnam now, but in the 90s, how Vietnam tried very hard.
Yeah, I would love to hear about that and food. I think the next podcast we'll do in a few months, we'll do it we'll do part 2. We'll do that, politics and food, those two things. And we'll talk a little bit about the book and the movie again. But
yeah, as you know, food is politics, right?
Yes.
Food is politics. Like why we all eat la vache qui rit, the French cheese all over the world.
Yes. Well, thank you, Thuy. We'll be talking very soon.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to The Vietnamese with Kenneth Nguyen. Special thanks to Brittany Tran, to Jane Nguyen, Catherine Nguyen, Tina Pham, Sydney Jamie, and Christo Trin. Please find us on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok at The Vietnamese Podcast.